The beginning. The small room was silent. Only the ticking of the clock could be heard steadily. Sophia sat there, in the old armchair, her hands gripping a cup of cold tea, her eyes distractedly looking out the window. Outside, the rain fell in heavy drops, streaming down the window frame, leaving behind blurry trails. The view outside was dim and faded, with the empty streets seeming to reflect her own mood. A suffocating loneliness enveloped her. Everything in life seemed tasteless and distant. Her husband, Daniel, had not come home for 3 days. 3 days, a length of time too long for her not to feel his absence. For 3 days, she hadn't received a call, a message, or any explanation. In the months before, Daniel had gradually changed. He was no longer the loving husband he once was in the early days of their marriage. He was no longer the person she could trust. Now he felt like a ghost, distant, cold, and indifferent. Inside Sophia, a flame of fear quietly burned, but she dared not face it. Daniel had not said a word of farewell. No explanation for his absence, only the painful silence left behind in this house. It was the silence of a marriage slowly dying. She remembered the early days when they first met, when Daniel's eyes were full of love. He had once looked at her with such sweetness, his gentle words making her feel like the happiest woman in the world. Daniel had been the one who made her believe in true love, to believe that she deserved love and respect. But now, all she could feel was indifference and disregard. Everything had changed, and it had changed too quickly. The words Daniel once said to her felt like a promise. "I will love you forever. I will never leave you." She had believed those words. But now, they seemed like a game of time. His love seemed to have run dry, replaced by disdain and criticism. She was no longer the woman he loved, now. She was just a shadow, a burden. She recalled the times when he mocked her appearance. "You're too fat, Sophia. You can't go out with me looking like that. You're a burden to me," he had said, his eyes as cold as ice. Those words haunted her mind, like a deep cut in her heart. She had tried to lose weight, but it seemed that the change only made Daniel despise her more. He never offered words of encouragement, never saw her as a person of value. To Daniel, she was just an outdated object, no longer suitable for him. Every time he came to bed, she couldn't sleep. She heard his breathing, feeling like a heavy chain was wrapped around her heart. Daniel had changed so much, and that change made her no longer recognize him. The times he looked at her with cold eyes, when he passed by her without a greeting, everything made her feel useless. Unloved, she felt like a silent shadow, always trying to smile when he couldn't see. But in reality, she was dying inside from the lack of affection. 3 days without Daniel made her feel like she had lost a part of her life. Even though he wasn't here, his absence only made her feel more acutely the loneliness, the emptiness she had been carrying for so long. She had grown accustomed to him not coming home at night, used to him speaking to her only with cold questions and curt replies. But now, without him, she felt lost in a world that didn't belong to her. Daniel didn't call, didn't text, didn't apologize. He remained silent, leaving her to sit and wait, drowning in anxiety and worry. She didn't know what to do, didn't know how much longer she would have to wait. She couldn't understand him. She couldn't understand why he was treating her this way. Where had his love gone? Where had her love gone? Sophia shivered slightly, wondering if all of this was just a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Was she living in a world where love and care were just empty words? Daniel was no longer the man she had loved, no longer the one who had shared all their hopes and dreams. Who was he now? She stood up, walked out to the balcony, the place where she used to stand every morning to greet the sunrise. But today, no light could dispel the darkness in her heart. The rain still fell, but she no longer felt the gentleness of each raindrop like she used to. Everything now felt blurry and meaningless. Daniel had changed. He no longer loved her. She knew that, but she couldn't accept it. And now, when everything had reached a point of no return, she didn't know what to do. How could she love herself when the person she loved the most looked at her like an outdated object? How could she find herself again when everything around her had collapsed? She felt like she was sinking into darkness. The love she had once believed in now was just a shadow, a faded memory. And in that moment, Sophia realized something clearly. She couldn't continue living in this pain. She couldn't keep waiting for Daniel anymore. She had to do something to save herself, to rediscover her own worth, no matter how difficult that path might be. Part 2. Endurance and Betrayal. Sophia sat motionless in the armchair in the dark living room. The room was only lit by a dim light in the corner, casting a yellowish glow against the cold walls. The air in the house was heavy, suffocating, as though it was pressing against each of her breaths. Daniel had been gone for 3 days, no phone calls, no explanation. She couldn't understand it, couldn't make sense of the silence. He had disappeared from her life without a single word of goodbye. Every time she looked at her phone, she hoped for a message, a call from him, but no, it was all just emptiness. Daniel had completely vanished, no longer the husband she had once loved. He was no longer the man she had dreamed of facing life's struggles with. Sophia stood up, the exhaustion and emptiness weighing heavily on her body. The days spent with Daniel had slowly faded into the background. She felt as if she were living in an endless nightmare, with everything around her crumbling, and no one there to save her. She stepped out onto the balcony, looking out into the distance. The night sky was pitch black, the clouds obscuring the moon, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. The houses around her were still, much like her life, silent and meaningless. Daniel had always criticized her appearance. He never once asked how she felt, never offered comfort or support. He didn't love her anymore, and that was so obvious. Since their marriage, everything seemed to have changed. He started paying attention to other women, criticizing and belittling her. Sophia clearly saw the way Daniel looked at thinner women, the ones he considered beautiful compared to her. His mocking words, his cold stares, had slowly chipped away at her self-confidence. "You can't go on like this," Daniel had said so many times. "You're too fat. You can't be my wife if you keep this up. I can't live with someone like you." That entire night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She sat on the bed, spinning in a whirlwind of disorganized thoughts. She wondered if there was anything she could do to change, to save the love, to salvage this relationship. But the only response she received was silence and Daniel's coldness. On the 3rd day, Daniel came back, but his return didn't bring her any joy. He walked into the house with a blank expression, offering no explanation for his 3-day absence. "You don't need to ask me where I've been or what I've been doing," he said in a lifeless voice, showing no concern for her feelings. Sophia couldn't take it anymore. She walked up to Daniel, her face streaked with tears. "Where have you been? You can't stay silent like this," she choked out. He didn't respond, merely coldly staring at her before walking to the sofa, sitting down, and not even looking at her. "You don't understand anything. I don't want to talk to you anymore," he answered flatly. It felt like a slap across Sophia's heart. She stood there, her eyes lost, not knowing what to do. Daniel's words were like knives, stabbing at her soul. She stood frozen, looking at him, trying to hold back the overwhelming pain inside. She felt like a trapped animal, with no way to escape. Daniel sat quietly, completely indifferent to her existence. She was exhausted from endless arguments, from his cruel and harsh criticisms. She couldn't live in this atmosphere of disrespect any longer. After a long silence, Sophia finally said what she had been holding inside for so long. "What do you want from me? You don't love me anymore, do you?" Daniel didn't respond right away. He closed his eyes, and after a moment, opened them and looked at her with a cold stare. "That's right, I don't love you anymore. Sophia, you're too fat, you're too ugly. I can't live with someone like you." Those words felt like a punch to the face. Each word he said ripped her heart apart. Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her husband, the man she had once loved, the man she had been willing to sacrifice everything for, was now saying these words. She stood still, her eyes filled with tears. "Why is this happening, Daniel? Why are you treating me like this?" He turned his back on her, his gaze emotionless. "I've already made my decision. You can't change anything anymore." The whole room felt still, the silence overwhelming. Sophia felt completely abandoned. Everything inside her felt like it was collapsing. Their relationship had ended a long time ago, but she still couldn't accept the truth. She didn't want to believe that he could treat her like this. But the truth was undeniable. From that moment, things only got worse. Daniel didn't just abandon her. He began talking about selling her. She couldn't believe that her husband would say such a thing. "I'll sell you off," Daniel said firmly, breaking her heart. "You're a burden to me. I don't need you anymore. You'll never be able to change that appearance of yours." That was the moment when Sophia felt completely defeated. She was no longer the woman Daniel had loved. Now she was just an object with no value. His betrayal was like a slap to her face. She no longer had the strength to cry. No strength to resist. All hope had shattered. She stood there, looking at Daniel as if he were a stranger. The pain inside her was so great that words couldn't express it. The days spent with him were now nothing but tear-filled memories. Sophia felt as though she had no worth, that no one would ever love her again. She was a failure in her own life, cast aside by the man to whom she had given her whole heart. Part 3. The encounter with Hunter and surprise. Sophia stepped into the stranger's truck, feeling like she was entering a completely new world, a place she wasn't familiar with. It was a large truck, simply decorated, with hard leather seats and the loud hum of the engine. The driver didn't speak, only silently driving, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Sophia looked out the window, where the soft light of the fading afternoon sun illuminated the empty streets. She felt like a lost soul, with nowhere to belong, no one to cling to. She didn't know how long they had been driving when the truck finally stopped in front of a large iron gate, with a faded sign that read, "Hunter's Farm." The name sounded somewhat familiar, but Sophia couldn't recall where she had heard it before. The driver got out of the truck, opened the door, and motioned for her to follow him. With no other choice, Sophia followed. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet space, each step stretching out her fear. She entered a vast farm, with simple wooden houses that seemed sturdy enough. The expansive fields stretched all the way to the horizon, but the place still gave her a feeling of loneliness and coldness. When she entered the house, Sophia noticed everything was very simple, but there was something strangely attractive about it. The large room had a fireplace crackling brightly, casting a warm yellow light. The walls were adorned with paintings, and the old leather chairs added to the sense of nostalgia. As she stood, taking in her surroundings, the stranger, Hunter, entered the room. Hunter was a tall man with tanned skin and a strong, commanding presence. He wore simple clothes, a plain shirt and jeans, but he exuded an undeniable charm and confidence. His gaze was strong, but there was a gentleness and empathy in his eyes, something Sophia had never felt from Daniel. "You need to be careful, Sophia," Hunter said in a deep, comforting voice, making her feel slightly less tense. "This is not a place for you to be afraid of. As long as you work and don't cause trouble, you'll be taken care of here." She looked at him for a moment and nodded slightly. Hunter wasn't exactly the person she had expected, but at least he didn't treat her like an object, though she still had many questions, fears, and doubts in her heart. She began to feel some form of comfort from his presence. In the following days, Sophia's life slowly began to change. Every morning, she woke up to the soft light of dawn filling the room, the peaceful and quiet atmosphere making her feel strange, yet peaceful. She worked in the fields, helping Hunter take care of the livestock, harvesting crops, and doing various tasks around the farm. Although the work wasn't easy, it helped her forget some of the pain from her past. She began to feel a sense of relaxation in each movement, in each breath she took while working. Every evening, after finishing the day's tasks, Sophia would sit by the fireplace in the living room. Hunter would sit opposite her, his eyes glowing in the firelight. His stories, about his past life, his time as a soldier, the struggles he had overcome, all made her feel like a completely different world was opening up before her. Hunter wasn't like the men she had met before. He didn't look at her with contempt. He didn't blame her for what had happened. Instead, he treated her with respect and understanding, something she had never received from Daniel. In those quiet moments together, Sophia felt like she was being seen for who she truly was. Not for her appearance, but for who she was as a person. This was something she had longed for all these years. One evening, as they sat beside the fire, Hunter said to her, "Do you know, Sophia, that you are stronger than you think? You just need to realize that. He looked at her with steady eyes, as if he wanted her to understand that she was not useless. Not a burden, as Daniel had once said. Hunter's words haunted Sophia throughout the night. She could feel the difference between true love and the cold words of Daniel. Though she was still afraid and hesitant to fully trust Hunter, she couldn't deny that he was the first person in a long time to make her feel respected and loved for who she was. A week later, while working in the fields, Sophia found herself in a difficult situation. One of the cows had been injured badly and couldn't move. She didn't know what to do, but Hunter arrived just in time, showing her how to handle the situation. He was gentle and patient, explaining each step without rushing or scolding. His calmness reassured her, and when the work was done, she felt like she had done something meaningful. Hunter looked at her and said, "You did great, Sophia. You'll see, you have the ability to do so much more." Day by day, Sophia began to find herself again. She no longer felt like a burden, no longer felt judged just for her appearance. Although the work on the farm was tough, she began to take pride in what she had accomplished. Hunter was always there, not to control her, but to help whenever she needed it. He never acted indifferent or distant, always offering sound advice and genuine encouragement. Still, deep inside, Sophia couldn't forget Daniel, the husband who had sold her because of her appearance. But now, when she looked at Hunter, she began to realize something. She deserved to be loved and respected. And perhaps, from this moment on, her life would change forever. Part 4. Change and Liberation. As time passed, Sophia's life at Hunter's farm gradually became a part of her routine. Every morning, she woke up as the sun began to rise, with the soft light of dawn creeping through the wooden windows and filling the room. The fresh and peaceful air of the farm made her feel like she was being reborn. A feeling she had never experienced during the suffocating years of her marriage. Each day, she worked in the fields, caring for the livestock, harvesting crops, and doing various chores around the farm. The physical labor wasn't easy, but with each passing day, the deep sadness from her past started to fade. She no longer felt like a burden. She no longer felt like she was being judged or discarded. Hunter wasn't just someone who had helped her escape, he had also become a friend, a mentor, and gradually, someone she began to feel close to. On quiet evenings, as they sat together by the fire, Hunter continued to be kind and patient, never rushing, always letting the conversation flow naturally. He shared stories about his life before, about his challenges, about the times he felt alone and defeated. But through each story, Sophia learned something important. No matter how hard life got, perseverance and optimism could always triumph. "You know, Sophia," Hunter once said on a quiet night, his eyes glowing in the firelight, "everyone has their own battles to fight, and everyone has the power to choose how to face them. What matters is that you never give up, no matter what." She looked into Hunter's steady eyes, feeling an unusual warmth from him. His words were like a healing balm to her wounded soul, replacing the cruel criticisms and coldness she had endured from Daniel. Though there had been clear changes in her mindset and in her life, a deep worry still haunted Sophia. She couldn't forget Daniel, the man who had betrayed her and sold her because of her appearance. She couldn't erase the humiliation she felt when he treated her like an object, dismissing her as if she were worth nothing. Those memories still lingered, and somewhere deep within her, she felt as though she had never truly been liberated. But then, one day, the worst thing she had feared finally happened. Daniel suddenly appeared at Hunter's farm. He stood at the entrance to the farm, his face unreadable, but there was a gleam of challenge in his eyes. Sophia felt her heart tighten. Despite her efforts to remain calm, she couldn't help but feel a surge of fear rise within her. She didn't know how to face him after everything that had happened. Hunter noticed the change in Sophia, and his gaze softened, filled with understanding but also firmness. He turned to look at Daniel, crossing his arms over his chest in a calm and composed manner. "What are you doing here?" Hunter asked, his voice steady and firm. Daniel looked at Hunter directly, unflinching. "I'm here to take her back," he said coldly, as if it were a foregone conclusion. "She's my wife, and I won't let her stay here." Sophia felt caught between two men. between the past and the present. Her emotions suddenly became a whirlwind. She couldn't believe Daniel had the audacity to show up here after what he had done, selling her, treating her as though she were worthless. But in this moment, when she looked into Hunter's eyes, she knew that this was the most important moment of her life. No, Daniel. Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the lingering fear in her heart. I'm no longer yours. I've freed myself from you. You can't take me back. Her words were simple but strong. She couldn't allow Daniel to control her life any longer. She had suffered enough, and now, she knew she deserved to be loved and respected. Daniel said nothing more, he just stared at her. Then turned his gaze to Hunter. She's not who you think she is. He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. She's a burden to me. And you can't save her. But Hunter just shook his head, refusing to engage in Daniel's cruelty. He turned to Sophia, then walked closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a supportive gesture. She's a strong woman, Daniel, Hunter said, his voice calm but unwavering. She deserves a better life than anything you've ever given her. Sophia looked at Hunter, then turned to look at Daniel one last time. Thank you for being part of my life, she said, her voice calm but firm. But from now on, I'll live my life, and you have no say in it anymore. Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. He didn't say another word as he disappeared through the farm's gate. Sophia watched him go, feeling a strange sense of liberation filling her heart. This was the first time she truly felt free, unburdened by the memories and betrayals of the past. She felt lighter, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from her life. And now, she could begin again, to live the life she truly deserved. Hunter stood beside her, his gaze warm but also resolute. He can't do anything to you anymore, Sophia, he said, gently but with absolute certainty. Now, you are free. Sophia felt a warm tear fall down her cheek. But it wasn't one of sorrow. It was a tear of liberation, of newfound belief in her future. She turned to look at Hunter, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Hunter, she whispered. You saved me, not just with your words, but with your actions. Hunter smiled, his smile as warm as the early morning sun. You saved yourself, Sophia, he said. I'm just here to remind you that you're capable of so much. In that moment, Sophia realized that she no longer needed anyone's approval but her own. She had found her own worth, and she had freed herself from the chains of the past. She knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them. She was no longer the woman Daniel had sold because of her appearance. She was Sophia, strong, free, and worthy of love. The ending. Sophia stood on the small porch of the house, gazing into the endless space before her. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with the scent of moisture. She took a deep breath, feeling the quietness of the world around her. Everything seemed to pause, but in her heart, a great transformation was happening. This wasn't just the end of one chapter in her life. It was the beginning of a new life. Daniel had left, and now, Sophia no longer had to endure his criticisms, his contemptuous looks. But his departure wasn't just a physical escape. It was also a release from the invisible chains she had bound herself with for so long. She had lived for too long in self-doubt, in the belief that she didn't deserve love. Daniel's cruel words and cold eyes had made her think she wasn't worthy of happiness, that she didn't deserve to be loved. But now, she realized that it had all been lies, the words of someone who didn't know how to cherish the person they loved. She closed her eyes, allowing the fading memories, the blurry images of Daniel, to drift away. In that moment, she felt a sense of relief spread through her body. She no longer had to fight the ghosts of the past. She no longer had to carry the weight of things that weren't hers to bear. It was time for her to allow herself to be happy. When Sophia opened her eyes again, she realized that her life was still long. She could move forward on her own, without looking back. Daniel was not everything, and she didn't need to seek approval from him anymore. Sophia understood that in order to love others, she first had to learn to love herself. She turned around, walked back into the house, and looked at the large mirror in the living room. Looking at herself, she no longer felt ashamed or insecure. She was no longer the overweight woman Daniel had mocked, nor the wife who always bowed her head to his contempt. Sophia realized that she was a strong woman, deserving of love and respect. She had endured the pain, but she wouldn't allow that pain to define her life. She deserved better, and she would find a way to get it. Her whole life, she had lived in Daniel's shadow. But now, she would step out into the light. Sophia didn't know where she was headed, but she knew for certain that she wouldn't be walking alone anymore. She would find herself again, rediscover the passions, the dreams she had abandoned long ago. And she would start over, step by step, from the small things. Before long, she decided to leave that house behind. It was too tied to painful memories of Daniel, too heavy for her to stay any longer. She moved to a new city, a place where the past could not follow, a place where she could begin again, starting from scratch. Each day that passed, Sophia felt the changes within herself. In the early days in the new city, she felt unfamiliar, but also free. She found a new job and began building a new life from the simple things. Though there were moments of loneliness, that loneliness was no longer the painful burden she had carried before. It was freedom, peace of mind, a moment when she realized that she could rise up on her own, walk forward without anyone's help. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Sophia met a man named James. He was nothing like Daniel. He looked at her with respect, not rushing, not judging, but with an understanding and gentleness. James was the first person in a long time to make her feel valued. He didn't look at her for her appearance, but for who she truly was. And in his eyes, she realized that true love wasn't about accepting someone based on their looks. It was a soul-to-soul connection. That was the love she had been waiting for. Sophia didn't rush, but she could feel that she wasn't alone anymore. She could love herself, and love another person without carrying the scars of the past. James wasn't a replacement for Daniel, but a new turning point in her life. An opportunity to start again, to love and be loved in the right way. As the days went by, Sophia found herself becoming stronger. She rediscovered joy in her work, in conversations with new friends, and in the peaceful moments she had never known before. She was no longer the weak woman Daniel had once seen. Sophia had found herself again, rediscovered her self-confidence and her faith in life. And one day, when she looked into the mirror, she no longer saw the tired, abandoned woman. She saw Sophia, a free, strong, and hopeful woman. She no longer feared the ghosts of the past, because she knew that her life was no longer defined by Daniel or anyone else. Her life, she was the one in charge of it.